Level Up is a regular podcast that brings you topics to help you perform at work and in life at your very highest level. Your host is Dan Chiodo, an executive coach, corporate trainer, and author. He is president of Impact Training and Executive Coaching. And now, here's Dan.
Thank you so much, Jesse. I appreciate that. This is our 35th podcast that we've done for Level Up, the place to go where you want to grow. And what we talk about here are the things that help you become a peak performer, or if you are a peak performer, just to get even better, no matter what your age, no matter what your profession. So today we're going to explore the food industry through the eyes of a young professional who's been a mover and a shaker in this field, both in this country and in China. So I would like to introduce my guest, Andy Minoie. Thank you for being here, Andy. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Happy to be here.
Great. Well, let's start by asking you, how did you get your start in the food industry?
Well, believe it or not, when I was about 15, I just, I was eager to get a job and make some extra money. And I started, my first job was working at a pizza place in a food court in a mall where I lived in Massachusetts. And I remember my big interest was the owner of the pizza place. One day he left to go do some shopping and we ran out of pizza and I made a pizza and he goes, "Oh, great job. Why don't you just continue making more pizza and I'll come back later."
Very good. Very good. So were you in charge when he left for that?
I mean, not really, no. Like it was a little family operating thing. And I think when they saw that I took the initiative to do something that, we had customers, we needed more pizza and I knew how to make it, that I think they just saw that opportunity to let me do that more to help them out. That way they wouldn't have to be there all the time.
That's beautiful. Do you look for that when you're hiring someone? You mentioned that great word, initiative. Is that something you're looking for?
Oh, for sure. For sure. Initiative is a big key with a lot of stuff, especially in food and beverage, because, whether it's trying to get things organized as orders come in from suppliers or just taking that extra step to try and connect with a customer or something, there's always, it's always good to look for that initiative in a person.
That's good. That's good. I think about that when you're in a business. You not only have your customers, but you have your vendors too. Mm-hmm. And so do you feel that those relationships have to be strong too?
Yeah, the relationship with a vendor needs to be very strong. You need to be able to see both sides of the supplier and yourself, So I used to witness it a lot with checking product, for example. If vegetables or something came in and the quality wasn't good, rather than get angry at that supplier, you kind of got to look at it from their end. Maybe where they're getting their product from is also not to their standard, but they still have to try to supply their customers. So trying to build that relationship and an understanding and let them understand what your standards are might help them also understand how to improve their own standards.
I like that. And for you to try to be understanding of what they're facing too.
Yeah.
I think that's great. So how many years have you been in the industry now?
I mean, honestly, so let's see. My first job was that place doing pizza. That was 15. So that would have been 23 years roughly. Mm-hmm. I mean, I've done some other odd jobs here and there, but I almost always end up back in food and beverage. So
now, what makes you come back to food and beverage?
At this point, I think for the last 15 years of constantly doing it, I think now I just have this good understanding for it. And maybe there's that being scared of a leap of faith to try something different, like I'm comfortable with what I know and maybe there's ways to grow within food and beverage. But I mean, I think I originally just enjoyed the style of it and that it was always changing and you could always make these connections with customers as well as help grow the people you worked with as well. Yes. I think I just saw it as an industry where you can do a lot more than just produce product and serve product. So
that's interesting. And I think that some of the viewers watching this podcast, they may say, well, I'm going to take a leap and go into a different field. But people should also know that they can be just as satisfied sometimes staying in the field they're in, but getting to know it better, making changes, making things happen within that field, right?
Yes, true, very true.
That is great. So right now, you see yourself in that industry, and that's where you want to be, right?
I mean, yeah, I think, maybe growing to be more on a corporate end of things, or doing something that might help multiple restaurants or environments or stores, as opposed to just being focused on one. I feel like that's something I'm wanting to work towards more. So we'll see how that develops. I mean, for now, I definitely enjoy being in the position I'm in and trying to develop and build up where I am. A good example is the previous job I had when I was in a restaurant in China. My boss had moved me around to quite a few different restaurants over the years because I was able to rebuild and like bring that morale up and help develop people. So I like that, but I think on a bigger scale with more than just one location to focus on would be something I'd want to work towards.
Yeah. Well, I've seen you in action, and I've seen you motivate people, and I've seen you have a message, and I hear and see them listening, and that's really good. That is very something special. Now, let's go to China for a minute and talk about, it was your brother Scott, I believe, that was a co-creator of the business you were in?
Yeah, he has been out there a little more than 20 years now. And he met some people, and he saw, an opening for something to cater towards foreign expats that were living out there for fresh salads and smoothies. And, long story short, they opened in a Gold's Gym. They developed a deli like smoothie counter, and then through the luck of a handshake for some developers in the city of Shanghai, they opened a restaurant, and then soon after opened more and more. And I was lucky enough to go out there in October of 2009 to help work on a store that was in Beijing. That was the first city they moved out of, because they were primarily based in Shanghai.
So it sounds like, as he developed these things, how did he find out what the need was?
Well, I think, so if you think back to, January 2000, because he was out there in December 99, and there was very little for, a foreign expat that was working or traveling to eat that wasn't, a five-star hotel buffet or something of that nature. And even at that time, I still remember him telling me stories of the concept of a salad in China was not something that was thought of, because it was, the vegetables should be cooked, or maybe it isn't safe enough, to just eat a raw vegetable, or not necessarily raw vegetable, but the salad with a mix of everything. And I think through the development of, people becoming more health conscious, and then looking to the way that foreign expats would also eat and the things that they would do, I think that helped influence things a lot. So it kind of really paved the way for a lot of other restaurants over the years that have come into China. So
he's kind of a trendsetter there. It sounds like it's still growing then, right?
Yeah, it's still growing. I think he is, with his restaurant, he's at about 40 locations, but I also know that he's starting some newer concepts that are going to be not more as like a sit down, restaurant that you have the waiter and everything. It might be more of a casual setting where you can kind of pre-order through, an app or something. I mean, everything out there right now is you could sit down at a table and scan a QR code on your phone and order directly from your phone without even having an app. So trying to keep up with those things, I think that's some stuff that he's looking into in the future.
You bet. When you were in China, you also managed a part of that, right?
On a little bit. My first year and a half there, I was just an assistant manager at a restaurant in Beijing. And then the company took on a project with Mercedes-Benz Arena that was established in, I think, 2011, about the time they had the World Expo out in China. And we, as the company, we were the food and beverage provider for the whole arena. So anything from concession stands to private events all the way up to the VIP level floor. And I helped run the VIP floor for about 9 to 10 months. And that was a pretty interesting time, because what you and I might think of if we went to an event or a concert at an arena and had a VIP room is very different than the culture that they had. So
actually, I want to hear more about that, but we're going to take a break first,
okay, great.
And that'll be very interesting to hear more about. Much more to cover about food and about a young professional that has been a part of the industry for quite a long time. This is Dan Chiodo, and I'm here today with Andy Minoie, and we'll be right back after this.
One company is on a mission to put 1 million people to work each year. Sounds like a big number, doesn't it? Not to Express Employment Professionals. Maybe you're an accountant, engineer, or an IT developer looking for the right firm. Or how about administrative positions? We are committed to your success and never charge you a fee to find a job. Express Employment Professionals is on a mission to put 1 million people to work each year. Let us help. We'll open doors for you. Go to expresspros.com to find a location near you.
If you've just tuned in, this is Level Up, podcast number 35. This is Dan Chiodo, your host, and with me is Andy Minoie, today talking about the food industry, as he has been a part of for a long time. On the flip side, we introduced the VIP floor, but not in this country, in China. So what is the difference, Andy? Tell us about that.
So a good example of the challenge of taking on that role with running a VIP floor was the arena itself is supposed to hold about 18,000 people. And here, for example, let's say I was a box owner. I own a VIP room. And I would say, hey, Dan, you want to go to this concert that's coming up or this event? Here's 20 tickets for the VIP room. You can get yourself and 19 friends to go and have a great time, order some food, drinks. But the challenge that we met out there was the people that owned some of these rooms would go, hey, Dan, here's 2 tickets for you to go and enjoy my VIP room. And then you would arrive and there would be 18 other people that you don't know. And are you going to want to split a $400 like platter of some sort of sushi and champagne or something? Or are you going to be more likely to go, I'll just get my own glass of wine and maybe, some snacks or something? So we had to kind of work around that. And what we did is we were able to adjust the menus to have high-end food that would be for smaller groups, as well as have almost like an a la carte type style food to where people could order an individual like packaged meal that would be for one person that we would deliver into the room. So I after 8 or 9 months of doing that, I never could get used to that. I was always like, you have all this amazing food you could order from us that's made like in-house from scratch, but you're fine in your VIP suite with your hot dog and peanuts and a couple beers, So there was a lot of education that we had to help with the people that ran the suites that were connected with the arena, and how to, have them talk to their guests about, different promotions or different ways they could order and utilize that suite.
Yeah. I love the way you can compare things from another country to here. Mm-hmm. What year did you come back to this country?
December of 2017.
Okay. And so did you meet your wife in China?
Yeah, actually my wife, I was her boss for a short time. So she was the assistant manager at the restaurant that I was in Shanghai. I did the VIP suites. Then I helped manage a restaurant there. And then they moved me back to Beijing because there was a new restaurant that they knew they needed some help with, and I had no problem going back to Beijing. And I met my wife when I found out that she was going to work for me. I told a good friend, I said, this might not be a good idea. It was kind of one of those love at first sight things.
Oh,
but
that's great.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Wonderful. So after you came back to this country, any things you noticed that were different?
Yeah. And I noticed a lot of things that I guess I was very used to in China, that when I got back here, it was like a reverse culture shock. Like I was in my home country and I was seeing things that I was surprised about, like, just certain little, polite ways people would do something, or maybe the differences in how something worked. Or a good example is going to the supermarket and seeing the way that you could purchase and find, meat and other things that were very different than the markets I was going to, where it wasn't prepackaged and you had to kind of pick things out. Or if you did go to an expensive market, the price would be very high because they packaged things differently, or it was imported or something. So there was a lot of little reverse culture shock type things because I got so used to everything there. And then I got back here and I was like, wow, I forgot that this is how things could be, or that things could be a little more simpler in some ways and more accessible. I think the biggest shock I had was anything that involved like medical. If I had to see a doctor here, the process was a little easier than when I was out there. So that was something that when I got back, I was like, oh yeah, I forgot this is how this country works. And
interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. So now, if you were in a supermarket in China, a grocery store, people had carts.
Yep.
So
yeah.
Are they more respectful and in that country or this country?
I would say here slightly more, but I mean, it's just a different mix of culture and the way people are, I think, I wouldn't say raised, but just a culture of the way things are, because there's markets here that get busy. And I mean, as you know, down here in Florida, we get a lot of tourists that come throughout the season. So it gets full with people in the supermarkets. But there it would be full with the supermarket all the time, and people would bump into each other, or they'd be reaching for something that you wanted and they would take it away quicker. There might not be a little conversation of, oh no, it's okay. Yeah, you can grab that. It just was very, very, very different in that aspect.
Now that is interesting because it's good to have a perspective from another country, because I would have thought you said that it's much more difficult here, because I was in a store the other day here in Southern Florida and people were almost running into each other. And I said to my wife, I think I know how each of these people drive. Because the way they were handling the carts, I thought this is probably what it's like on the road. So, well, let's see. There in China, you work with a team of about 20, or did work with a team of about 20?
Actually, much more than that.
Okay.
So the first restaurant that I managed when I was there was about probably a little over 50 people.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, we have our front of house staff, which would consist of, waiters, a hostess, and a food runner. Then we have our kitchen, but it was split into two. It was a cold kitchen for, cold sandwiches, salads, and then there was a hot kitchen, a dishwashing station, delivery guys, because we did delivery. And then there would be maybe, some maintenance people every once in a while that worked for the region, but would also pop in and out. So
Okay. So here in this country, you have about, 20 people or so?
Yeah, right now I'm with about 22, 23 people, but as we get further into the season that we have down here, I'm looking to get up to 28 or 30 or so.
Okay. So my question is, because no matter what field people are in, you have to hire. And you have to get the right people. So give us an idea in terms of team members. What do you look for? What's important?
I mean, every place I've ever worked, they tend to have, their plan for an interview on the questions they would, want to have asked. And I'll kind of use that as a guide, and I'll deviate off a little bit. But I think a lot of it has to do with the composure that the person that you're interviewing has. You can kind of tell a lot from somebody by the way they have their body language or the way they, answer some questions. And then also, as we ask questions that involve teamwork, I always like to ask, when you think of teamwork, what 2 words come to mind? And depending on what they say might also give me a feeling of how their thought process is with a team. So, it's all about the responses you get. If you get a response to your question that kind of skirts around what you're trying to hear, then maybe you can chalk that up to they're not knowing how to word themselves properly, or maybe they just don't know what it is for that, service aspect, or what it is that would entail the answering that question. I guess a good example would be when you ask somebody, give me an example of exceptional service you've had in the last couple weeks. And if they can't think of anything, or they try to connect it to, the restaurant that they're interviewing at, I that kind of makes me judge that they're trying to really work hard to think of something. But if it's exceptional service, you're going to remember right away. You're going to remember, like, oh yeah, last week I had my oil changed and the service they provided was amazing. It doesn't necessarily have to be related to the field that I'm interviewing them for. Because I think if you can speak to what it is that you feel was an exceptional service, or you can speak well to what the question connects to in your own life, it'll give me a better idea on how you'll work, or how you'll, be able to fit in with the team as well.
I like that. So you've talked about composure, body language, how they answer questions, teamwork, their thought processes, responses you get to things. These things are very important, aren't they? Because you then sometimes choose leaders from that group, correct?
Yes, correct. Yep. So that's also a big thing, and as you work in industries like food and beverage, or an industry like food and beverage, it's also a corporation that might be developing in areas. You always want to try to interview with the idea of, is this person a clock in, clock out person? Are they a person who's going to be here and have that drive and initiative to work with the team? And then lastly, are they going to be somebody that you could see 6 months to a year going up a level? So are they going to be sitting across from me in a district meeting with other managers one day? And I think that's something that I like to do a lot. I like to really try to look for that in people, to see like how I can develop. And even now where I am, it gets tough because I have a lot of, university students. So anywhere from 19 to 21. And I try to coach them and teach them in ways that I think will not only maybe help them develop working with me, but also help them when they leave the company and go on to pursue something else. So
that's nice, because that looks at them as a person, not just a person working at where you are.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think that's excellent.
Yeah.
And sometimes I will ask clients, who are your best bosses in your And they can do that pretty quickly. They can tell me pretty quickly. However, sometimes I'll also say, what are some of the things that your worst bosses did? And they can also tell me about that.
Yes, very true.
So I think, too, that our job as leaders is to hire people who will be leaders. Isn't that?
Yep, for sure.
What we have?
Yeah. And even now, I mean, I like to think sometimes with people that I want to have grow, I'll also explain to them, like, so you should be working towards this milestone, and you should also be thinking about who your teammates are that would replace you as you moved up. And even to the point where where I am now, I have an assistant manager with me, and I keep telling him things like, you need to think of how you're going to replace me if I move on or I develop or something. So I want to train you. Basically, I want to train you to replace me one day, because my goal is to move up.
Yeah. I think that's excellent. And I think in generations past, we haven't always done that. In generations past, sometimes we just choose a leader, sometimes because they're the next one up. They're the most senior person. And we haven't even asked them or haven't thought about whether they would be good with people. And I think you have to be good with people. As you say, you really have to know about their teamwork.
Yes.
Something I recently read said you have to know not only the teamwork, but you have to make sure they would be good teammates.
Yes. Yep.
Because this group will be interacting together. And the public watches that sometimes. How does this team get along?
Yeah, and that too, right there, the idea that you just said about how the team gets along, that's one of the most, that's probably within the top 3 for me of working in food and beverages, because if you can see as a customer the team's getting along and they're having a positive energy, that's infectious. That gets into you as well. So if everyone is happy and working well together, and you can see that, you yourself, even if you haven't had a chance to talk to them working, you can feel that, and that helps you feel a little more energized in a way,
I think you're right. That is wonderful. Well, as I said, I've seen you in action. I know how great you are, and also that you're so humble.
Thank you.
I think sometimes we lose our roots. We become leaders, but then some people become more autocratic. Some people forget to listen as leaders, and you don't do that. And I think that that's why your people love to work with
Possibly.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Andy. I appreciate that. And for our listeners, look at our show notes and look at some of these items that Andy has brought in front of us to think about the teams that you're going to hire, the people that you're going to hire for whatever role it is. And as I said, sometimes we hire leaders and we just do it. It's called the spaghetti method. We throw it on the wall and see if it sticks. And then we find that it doesn't work out. So to do some of the things that Andy does and ask some of these questions, these areas, composure, body language, the questions that you ask and how they answer them, this is all vital, I think, for growth. So thank you for joining us for this episode of Level Up, the place to go when you want to grow.
Thank you.
Cheers.
All right.
Thank you, Andy.
No problem. Thanks.